to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we're on a journey to answer 4 leadership questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. So with us today, we are pleased to have special guest, Dr. Rakene Lee. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, sir. Appreciate it.
Oh, glad you're here. We're really excited to have you on the program. So let's just jump right into it and get started. Introduce yourself to our listeners. Give us a little bit of a background. Like one of my favorite shows goes, who you are and what you do.
I hear that. Well, thank you again for having me. My name is Dr. Rakene Lee. I was born and raised in New Jersey. Went to high school at North Brunswick High School. While I was in high school, I played football and wrestled. And doing those sports kind of motivated me to want to join the Marine Corps. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1998. I was infantry by trade. I also served as a drill instructor. I was an advisor when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I did some other additional things, and specifically human resources, leadership development. And I was also able to go to school while I was in the Marine Corps. Let me back up a little bit. I served as a drill instructor 2008 to 2011. And while I was there, that kind of ignited my passion for higher education. People think that being a drill instructor is a lot of screaming and yelling, which that's true to a certain extent. But you definitely right. You definitely want to make sure that you're teaching, you're leading, and you're instructing. And I really enjoyed that part of that. So once I left there, went to Afghanistan. Got back from Afghanistan. I went to San Diego, California. And from there, I retired. Retired as a first sergeant. That's an E8, so I got promoted to rank except for one.
Nice.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that doesn't happen by accident, sir.
Well, the grace of God, family, great mentors, and great people definitely helped me out along the way. And also, the addition to Iraq and Afghanistan, I also went to Japan, Thailand, and Korea.
Very cool. Very cool. So you've been all over the place.
So to speak, a little bit, yeah.
Nice. So what kind of got you into where you're at now? And tell us a little bit more about your educational journey, because I know that within the last year, recently changed your first name without having to go to court.
Yes, I like that.
I had a similar experience, so tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So once I retired from the Marine Corps, I wanted to get a career in higher education. So I first started working at Northern Virginia Community College. I was there. I started off as the employee relations specialist, and I got promoted to the senior employee relations specialist. And while I was there, I started going to school for my doctorate degree. And it's funny because I never envisioned getting a doctorate degree. I never even envisioned going to college. I just wanted to be a Marine. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I thought about. That's all, that's my passion. But again, once you're surrounded by the elite, top of the spirit type folks, it kind of encourages and motivates you to go towards that journey. So while I was at Northern Virginia Community College, I had interactions with, deans, provosts, faculty members, professors, senior administrators, and very important people. And that kind of motivated me. I was like, you know what? Maybe I could look at getting my doctorate degree. So I started asking a little bit about the typical programs, because other than having 2 masters, I wasn't thinking about, higher education and what that would look like, the rigorous course and workload and stuff like that. So I looked at Liberty University. I was very impressed because they're a Christian-based school. So that really got my attention, and they really do a lot for the military. So that really, sparked my interest just even more. So I talked to one of the counselors there and kind of see what the course will look like, and kind of, see what all I had to do to get a doctorate degree. And me personally, I love challenges, so I was like, let's do it. So I wind up signing up. I told myself, I said, if I get past the first course, it's downhill from there. I said, just let me make it through the first course. And the first course knocked out the park. So I was like, okay, maybe this is it. So everything was going pretty fine up until I started doing my research.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that fun?
Oh, my goodness.
That dissertation, something else.
Absolutely. So once I start doing my research, it's very humbling, but you got to stick with it. It's very humbling, and it teaches you just a lot about yourself because you can really go beyond what you think you can. As long as you don't give in, you don't give up, and you just keep pushing. And I always like to find out more, just kind of what the root cause of the problem is. So I started doing my research. I finished, and I defended last November.
Nice.
So Doctor of Education, Education Leadership.
Nice. What was your topic of research? What was your dissertation on?
Right. So it's a great question. So recommendations for improving the high dropout rate amongst the minority students in a business school at Shenandoah University. So our business school, a lot of the minority students, particularly Black students, were dropping out of the business administration program, and I was trying to find out. And just through my research, there's various reasons why. Based off of a lot of them come here with they tend to underestimate the rigors of business and how focused, how disciplined that you have to be. And, a lot of them are, student athletes. So they're focused. So they basically say, well, you know what? I want to go to school, I want to go to college, but I want to play sports as well. So the education piece is not the number one priority. They're looking for sports. So, what you got to be balanced, like you can't have one over the other. That and just also just not informing them on the amount of work that required, that's required for this program. So some of the recommendations that I included in my research proposal was to find a way to, give them the information on the front end, give them information on the front end, and also work closely so the parents understand as well, because this is a team effort. Want to make sure that parents are keeping them engaged, keeping them focused, and just making sure that our counselors and our administrators, here, if they're noticing a student that's falling short, seeing what we have to do to make sure that they finish with the program. So that was my study. That's my research. The business school administrators, starting from the dean on down, were very supportive. They helped me out a lot. Our admissions team as well. So, number love for the university. They definitely helped me out. And then, I could honestly say that without their support, I wouldn't have finished it. So, I definitely thank Shenandoah for that. Appreciate it.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, I love the idea that you're talking about, hey, we actually come up with some possible solutions. And you're right that, they're not as familiar. If one of the causes is, hey, I don't realize how hard this is going to be, letting them know well beforehand, hey, man, this is going to be a major step up. Like, I know every time, I don't know your experience, but every time I seem to step up, whether it's from, high school to community college to university. By the way, speaking about bachelor's in university, where I just had to remind all the listeners that the real HU is Hampton University. Okay, so just throwing that out there. What's that? Throw them up every time I can. But and then going from the bachelor's to the master's, like every time I stepped up, it was like that first course is like, holy crap! And it's just drinking from a fire hose, and can I keep up? And then you finally catch your pace, right? In the master's, man, I got this. And then that first course coming up, like you said, for the doctorate, it's kind of like, this will just be that with a little bit more. Yes. Yeah, it was like that punch in the face. It's like, holy crap. But like you said, once you it's like, I thought for sure, like doubling up on classes in a master's, you're like, oh yeah, this will be like taking the one course for the doctorate. No. Right. And so every time it stepped up and letting them know that, hey, this isn't just going to be grade 13.
Right. Yes.
Right. This is a big step up. It's really cool to kind of give them that onboarding and prep beforehand.
And that's kind of what we signed up to do. So like I said, earlier, the challenge is what I really expected. But yes, once you start doing the research, and even though it's challenging, can be a woman at times, it definitely gets you to think outside the box. And I think for to get to that caliber, it requires you to think about things that you won't think about, and also to work harder than you won't typically work. So it's the reason why they set us apart. So.
Nice. And like I said, and hopefully a lot more universities will start to look at that research and figure out, hey, what can we do to reduce our dropout rates significantly?
Right.
So, and the one thing too that, a lot of the listeners that haven't gone through that process may not realize is that, when you're going through class, you're like, all right, I finished the first course, I got this, and you kind of adjust to the pace. I guess that's the nicest way I can put it on tape. But once you have that structure.
Right.
This assignment is due by this time, and this post is due by this. And but once you finish your comp exams, you finish your coursework, like that structure is over.
Yes.
It's like you're completely on your own. You're thinking this is going to be great until life gets in the way. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. I gotta like. There's nobody pushing me, and I don't have a
Right.
deadline. Like,
Right.
am I going to get this?
And you know what? I'm glad you brought. I think that right there, having that discipline, because it's not the greater course 13. Just having that discipline to say, okay, I need to get this done, setting like internal timelines and stuff like that. So that's why I say the research part really had me to, okay, let me sit back, let me set these these parameters, these deadlines in place to help me to make sure, because it's so easy to fall behind. It's so easy to fall behind. It's so easy to get
Yes.
demotivated, and that really helped me out. Just setting these deadlines, like, okay, on this date, this is what I'm going to do. On this time, this is what I'm going to do. And I just block everything out. And again, you need that support from your family, from your peers, from your mentors, and you just got to keep going. And I think, again, what also motivated me is seeing others who have done it, who have had similar backgrounds or experiences that I've had. I'm like, okay, well, if they can do it. You know what I'm saying? They can do it, and I can do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it was funny. I didn't let you in on the kind of secret. I got a new job as soon as, which they recommended not to do. As soon as I finished my coursework and comp exams, I ended up with a new job and trying to adjust to that, which ended up being a 60 to 80 hour week ordeal. I was like, okay. At some point, I started getting behind. I'm like, hey, if I'm going to actually finish this thing, man, obviously I'm not going to finish it in the 4 years, but I'm like, okay, if I'm going to finish this thing at all before they cut me off, like I got to get busy. And so what I ended up doing, I'm like, okay, I couldn't find the balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to go like crazy on this thing. So what I did is I had so much comp time and vacation time built up. I literally took 3 weeks off, and week 1, chapter 1, week 2, chapter 2. I literally locked myself in the office, and I literally had just first 3 chapters for the proposal. That was it, man. I was, 16 a day, didn't care, locked in there like, coffee by the 5-gallon jug. It didn't matter, man. I was gonna, but yeah, I banged out a chapter a week, and then I did my proposal and started the research, and that's like herding cats, trying to get everybody to get the surveys done. And God, and it's funny because I didn't necessarily trust the responses. Like I was looking at the difference between your leadership style or your how much of a self-directed learner you were, and how that affected your leadership style and how effective you were as a leader. So my hypothesis, I thought, hey, if you're more of a self-directed and autonomous learner, you're going to be more effective as a leader. Well, I didn't want to hear, right? So, I mean, you do a self-report on, your style of, learning or whatever, how autonomous or how self-directed your learning style is. Yeah, that's fairly accurate. But I wasn't going to have somebody, with a leadership questionnaire, like tell me how effective they were as a leader. I'm like, I don't believe you. I don't care what you say. So we ended up doing a 360, and all the ones that they had to have a certain one and I measured it by what their subordinates said how effective they were as a leader.
Right. Wow.
But my God, it dialed up the complexity on it, and the cat herding by having to get them guys to, it wasn't just one person to get there as the one person's subordinates, but I think I got a lot better data.
Yeah, right.
On that. Yeah, I did the same thing for chapter 4 and 5 after I got the research done. All right, 2 weeks off and bang this thing out. And I couldn't do the balance, man. I had to like total shut off to get it knocked out. But you're right. If you could see some other people say, hey, that guy did it, I can do it too. That's a big one. And I tell you what, before we finish this segment, then we'll start getting to the questions. The second one, you said something before that I really, really picked up on and liked, and can go a little bit deeper on it. You said that when you started working for the community college, all of a sudden you were around provosts and deans and people that had. So it's funny. I just interviewed a guy named Ron Price. He was a president for TTI Success Insights. He had a consulting business for, 20, 30 years. He, offices here, offices in China. I mean, he was all over the world. I mean, and it was, and his big thing he mentioned was, in 5 years, you're going to be the sum of the 5 people you're around the most and the books that you're reading and the people you're around, basically. And it's kind of like, just because you were in that environment, you never thought when you were screaming and yelling at people in Paris Island that, okay, well, I'm going to be Dr. Lee.
Right.
But then when you're around the different set of people. And you're like,
Right.
wow, okay, these folks put their pants on one leg at a time like I do, and
Absolutely.
they've got the magic ticket, and I got to have the magic ticket if I want to,
Right.
move up in that's the admission card, right?
Yes.
You can't
Yes.
play the game without the card. So it's
Yes.
really cool that you mentioned that you were around them, and that's
Right.
what inspired you to see, hey, I can do this.
Yeah, that and being around them and their encouragement also. Like they gave me some really good encouragement. It's good words of wisdom, and just motivated me more to say, you know what, let me go ahead and do it. And mind you, I was talking to a lot of the professors, a lot of the faculty members, a lot of the provosts, and just they really impressed me, and it really pressed upon me that hey, you you could do it. What I learned, which I forgot to mention, is for me, education is not about how smart you are; it's about how disciplined you are. Because you could be the smartest person in the world, but not finish the journey. So me, I knew being a Marine that I have discipline. I may not learn as fast, I may not be as smart, but I had a discipline and I'm not going to stop. And I think that discipline helped me so much.
Oh, it's funny you say that. I've told people this a million times. There's a whole lot more people smarter than I am, right? That don't have a PhD, and I don't look
Yeah,
at it. I don't look at that program as a measure of intelligence. It's
right.
more of a measure of persistence.
100%.
As
100%.
I say, I think it's one of those things, man. You just keep showing up, right?
Right.
You keep doing what they ask you to do, and at
Right.
some point they get a guilty conscience. Man, this guy's taking a beat down for 4 years, man. We have run him the
Yeah, we
ringer.
got to take care of them.
Tired of taking all this money. Just give him the sheepskin
Yeah,
and say,
yeah, yeah. We got to
all
take
right,
care of
you win.
them.
Right? Hung in there long enough, you win, right? That's all it is. And you ain't got to be the brightest bulb with the
Right.
marquee. You got to be one persistent, but you know what, to make it
Just
happen.
keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
Just keep going, right? Keep plugging away, man. That's the ticket. And just keep whatever they throw at you, just figure it
Mhm.
out.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
well, that is a perfect place to end this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. David. We will get into our first actual question when we come back. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are here with special guest Dr. Rakene Lee, and we are going to jump headfirst into our question, which is, what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
It's a great question. I think leadership means to me, one, putting employees' needs before your own. And I say that because I think that leaders are supposed to always eat last, and what good leadership looks like, it was one, setting and leading an example, and you can't set the example or lead from sitting behind a desk. So you
Yeah.
have to actually get out there, find out what's going on, and be approachable, be visible. And I think more importantly, you have to have courage because you're going to be faced with some difficult decisions, some difficult situations. And if you're not strong enough with the courage and also with just the discipline that you need to make these decisions and to continue to go with whatever decision you made, then it could overtake you. So I definitely think just having the courage to make the decision and to stand on it, which kind of ties into the accountability piece as well. I think as a leader, you have to have accountability, not only for the employees but for yourself as well. And it takes a lot of self-reflecting, a lot of looking in the mirror and just being able to find out, okay, how could I improve? Where am I short? And I know you mentioned before that 360 feedback. Well, I have all my employees, do the 360 feedback and do their assessments on me as well, because I need to
Yeah.
know if I'm dropping the ball somewhere, let me know. And that goes into my next point. You have to have thick skin, and I say that because you have to take the good with the bad, and you have to realize that there's always an area or department you could get better within yourself. And I think once you identify that, once you realize that, and once you try to take these measures to fix that, I think not only you, but the institution will be better, just overall across the board, 100%.
Nice, nice, nice. No, it's a couple things you were saying. One, like I said, trying to be accountable for yourself and putting the employees' needs kind of before you. Like I said, I love the book, Leaders Eat Last. Like I said, it's
Yes.
really nice
Yes.
that Simon Sinek took the concept that had been forever ingrained in the military and be able to translate that to a civilian audience. I mean,
Right. Yes.
with the military, fire service, whatever, anything like
Yes.
that, you know that, okay, these guys got to get taken care of first, because I
Right.
mean, they're the ones doing the job, just
Right.
making sure they have what they need to do it. But
Right.
I don't think that a lot of civilian leadership at the time, especially big corporate business, big corporate, is like, hey, I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. I got my car, I got my driver, I got my assistants, I've got this, and this, and realizing that you're not the one interfacing with the customer. You're not the one looking down the barrel of that gun. You're not the one, you're the one putting the fire out with the radio, not the hose,
Right. Right.
So whatever the context is taking care of your people.
Yes, yes. And just tying off with that point, in the Marine Corps, we have this saying, privates and PFCs up front whenever it's time to eat. Meaning the lowest junior grade, the lowest employee will eat before the seniors, eat. And that small little concept, have a lot of value. And if you peel those layers back, there are a lot of different leadership principles that are just within that one statement right there. If you really think about it. So,
Yeah.
I'm reading Leaders Eat Last now, and a lot of those other concepts, a lot of those other ideas are just starting to resurface just from my experience, not just in the Marines, but in higher education as well. Just taking care of your employees, knowing whenever they need a break, knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are. Because if you know that, then I think you could prevent the burnout. I think you can prevent them being overworked. I think you can prevent them having, any type of, breakdowns, because you know how much you could put on them and what you can't, and what they can and what they can't do. So, and I think the way to, know that is effective communication, meeting with them on a daily basis, asking them questions, and just find out what's going on. And not only just about business, ask them just how they're doing, how their family's doing. Just show them that you care. You don't have to get too personal, dive deep into their personal lives. But I think if they know that you care and that you want to see them succeed and be successful, I think you wouldn't have to ask them to go above and beyond. Like, they'll do it willingly.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but like you said, just them knowing that you genuinely care about them as a person.
Right.
Not trying to necessarily get into all the personal business, but I mean, at least I care about you as a person. You're not just a cog in the wheel. You're not just here to tick the box, get the job done, put the plastic bottles in the cardboard box and go home, whatever it is. Make sure the floor gets mopped, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You actually, and I like what you also said about, it doesn't have to be a formal meeting. And my God, it shouldn't be the once a year performance evaluation when that's the only time they hear about how they're doing. I mean, that every day, just a quick couple minute touch base, how you doing, how things going, keep the conversation going.
Right.
Not just with your team, but I think the higher up you go, I mentioned this the other day in a workshop that, I'm not trying to, torpedo the chain of command, but as you get higher in the rank, you've got to have a way to effectively have honest and open, transparent communications with the frontline staff and the frontline supervisors, because, and I'm not to be disparaging, but I love to make a joke out of it. The world's best filtration system is not activated charcoal. It is not reverse osmosis. It is middle management.
No, I like it.
They're not going to tell you, hey, VP Rakene, or hey, CEO Rakene, guess what? My guys, it's a dumpster fire in my department. They're not going to tell you that, right?
Right.
Everything's good, boss. And then same thing. I mean, it could be like the ship is, we're racing to the iceberg, right? And the C-suite and the department heads, and they're not going to go to the frontline staff and say, hey, we're in big trouble, because they know everyone's going to jump off. So, I mean, if you're in that senior leadership, you've got to have a way to, get those back channels open to get that, feedback and that chatter from the ground, versus just showing up in the employee cafeteria one day with your Brooks Brothers suit and say, how's everything going, people? And they're like, great, boss. I mean, what do you think they're going to say?
Right.
That's not open in a communication. That's just,
Yeah. And if you're visible and transparent, you want to ask what's going on, you will see, you already know the answer to that question. So.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I'm going to relate it back to HR, because I know you can sympathize with this, especially like when we had our local SHRM chapter meeting
Mhm.
yesterday, and one of the things that it always makes my heart happy when it's somebody locally just took a senior HR position at an organization, and 4 or 5 months later, I'm hearing from the folks on the ground that I know that, you know what, when an executive and HR show up, people don't go running for the hills anymore, right? They're like, oh my God,
Right.
they actually want to know what we think. And oh
Yes.
my God, they're
Yes.
actually doing
Yes.
something about it. And
Yes.
for the only
Yes.
time, and it's the familiarity part of it, they see them coming around all the
Yeah.
time and actually doing stuff with the things that they ask them about. Because if the only time they see you is when someone's getting terminated, then there's automatically by that association, oh crap, HR is here, run. Go to
Right.
lunch, run, get out of here,
Right.
shut the door or
Right.
something, look busy. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
and then, we do ourselves a disservice, I think, in leadership and particularly HR, when the only time you see an executive or the only time you see HR is when there's something bad going on.
Right.
So I
Right.
like what you said about that, constantly being there, and you
Yeah.
just got that familiarity where you can have the conversations.
Right.
Where it's that once a year show up, then you're just not.
Right. Yeah. Interesting thing that you mentioned. So my first 30 days here, one of the things I wanted to do was meet with all of the senior administrators, the mid-level managers, and also the employees as well. And I tried to, again, try to be visible to let them know that HR is here to help, because so many, institutions, whenever they see HR, is always for their performance or they're being terminated. And I wanted to dispel that rumor and build that rapport. So whenever they need something, it's a phone call away. Whenever I need something, it's a phone call away. And it's not just all about, let's hold this person accountable, let's do this, let's do that. Well, let's find out what's going on first. So I really try hard to just get out. I think I wore out 2 or 3 pair of shoes, just walking around, campus, just talking to people and just finding out what's going on. And I had like so many notepads that I just went through. And of course, I'm not going to solve all of the answers, but definitely, my team and I try to make try to make an attempt, try to make an approach, and let the employees know that they're being heard. They know that you're not going to resolve all of the issues, but at least that they're being heard. At least you're, making an honest approach and assessment to resolve those issues. So again, building that rapport, and that's being out and about.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And like I said, whether that's in your case wearing out 2 or 3 pair of shoes because it's higher education, you got a decent sized campus, or even if it's in the manufacturing, with the lean process improvement, all right, why has the boss drawing all these little circles all over the place? It's like he's drawing these little owner circles, right? And he's gonna stand there and just kind of observe and watch and make sure that the lunchroom and the cafeteria is not a place that he doesn't ever frequent, right? He's there in the break room, gets a chance to kind of familiarize himself with the people, and they see him around all the time. And like I said, when they build up that comfort level, they're more than willing to, or at least a little bit more willing to talk to you about what's going on. But, no, absolutely. And but I want to jump straight into the next question, because I think that kind of lends itself to a good one. What's one of the biggest leadership challenges that you've had to face?
Oh, that's a great question. I think me personally, myself, is transitioning from the Marine Corps, and I say that's a big leadership challenge for me, because just not knowing, just not knowing kind of how the outside is going to look, especially, that's been my home for 20 years. Knowing that, I want to do higher education, how do you make that transition from going from this person that's been in the infantry, that's been in wars, that's been on the drill field, that's had all of this, combat, things, but a lot of leadership as well. How do you transfer that to higher education to, folks who right out of high school went to college and they had a administrative role, or they became a dean or provost? How do you transfer that? So I think that right there was a big challenge for me. Also, for the organization standpoint, one of the biggest challenges that I faced was, being dropped into an area where you basically had employees that had low morale. You had employees that felt that the leadership didn't care about them, and couple that with the fact that the productivity wasn't where it needed to be. So you have all of these, and you're the new guy, and you got to figure all this stuff out. So you
Merry
get there.
Christmas.
Yeah. Here you go. Welcome to the job, right?
Exactly.
So Yeah. So just throughout my years, I think that's been the biggest challenge. But one of the things that I've stuck with ever since I was younger in the Marine Corps, man, is just finding out what the problem is and just asking people, hey, what's wrong? Before making the biggest mistake of thinking that you know when you first get in there, because
Yeah.
you could spend all this time and energy, trying to resolve an issue that's not even a real issue. So just finding the root cause of the problem. So those two have been bigger challenges, with doing the transition from the service, and also being put in a situation to where it's basically, it seems like all of the chips were against me. It seems like, I had to work with the employees, I had to build them around, I had to make sure that my supervisors were taken care of. I had to make sure that the level of productivity was at its all time, was at its all time high. I had to make sure that no balls are being dropped. And that took me to roll my sleeves up and I got to work, find out, okay, this is what we got to do. This is what the mission is. And once the employees and the organization, they see that effort, it's infectious, right? Like they want to work with you and they want to do the same exact thing. So, just bringing them all together, say, look, we're a team. This is what we're going to do. This is what we have to do. And keep the checks and balances on both levels, definitely helped out a lot for me.
Nice. Well, a couple of things that you had mentioned that really stood out is, like I said, it just came down to engagement. You've got, like I said, poor morale, and like I said, we don't think the leaders are hearing us. So I mean,
Right.
you end up being stuck. I hate to say between a rock and a hard place, but you're
Absolutely,
like, okay, I got to deal with the employees. Also, I've got to coach the leadership, kind of coach up on like, hey, these are some things you need to do to make sure they're getting what they need.
Right.
Because if they're not getting what they need, you're not going to get what you need, i.e., productivity, engaged employees, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's can be a vicious circle or it could be a righteous circle. It depends on how, are you going up or are you spiraling down?
Right.
And unfortunately, because I've had a similar experience with one job, you walk in and don't realize sometimes how deep is the hole I have to dig myself out of to get on an even par.
Yes.
And it's quite a, and some things, it's not good or bad. It just happens to the situation is just evolved that way over time, right? And from no intentionality, it's just how it kind of naturally evolved. And you realize, wow, we wake up one day and we're not in the best place that we could be.
Right.
And what do we got to do to really step this thing up? So you kind of hitting the challenge from both ends.
Right.
But when you can act, when they realize, and this takes unfortunately some time. All right, so you just come in as a just flash in the pan, check the box, flavor of the month, blah, blah, blah. But when they realize that you really have that commitment and you genuinely care about improving them, the organization, stuff like that, then they're in. Yeah, they'll buy in at that point, where before you got to put forth an extraordinary amount of effort to overprove the fact that you're the real deal and you're actually trying to help them versus just check the box.
And letting them know, and definitely letting them know that that they can trust you. I think trust is another issue. If the employees feel that they can't trust the leadership or trust the environment or even trust the work that they're in,
it's done. It's done at that point. It's just you go from ever having a chance to have an engaged employee to the best you can hope for is not engaged, a clock puncher. All right, I come in at 9, I leave at 5. I don't burn the place down. Okay,
just like enough to get by.
Just enough to get by, man. It's the unholy HR contract, man. I've been calling it that for years, the unholy contract, right? And I work just hard enough not to get fired, and you pay me just enough not for me to quit, right?
Right.
And that's not the best you're ever going to get, right? And you're just happy they're not one of the, actively disengaged, the bomb throwers, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You just, right, yeah, the ones that cost you, right, real money.
Right.
But yeah, but I would, now let's see, what are we looking at for, let's go ahead and jump into our next question and our next segment. And so we'll go ahead and wrap this segment up and we'll be back for our final segment and our last 2 questions on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave in just a moment. Right. Welcome back for our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. And we are here with special guest, Dr. Rakene Lee. And we're going to jump into our next to last question. Dr. Lee, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
Great question.
That was not loaded at all.
No, not at all. I'm gonna pull a little bit from the last response that I mentioned. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is not knowing their employees, not knowing just what the mission is, and that comes through the lack of communication. Case in point, take a brand new leader that's being put in a situation to fix whatever the problems are. Instead of finding out, okay, what the issue is, from the employees, from the folks that's been there, and also just seeing what the efficiency level is. Some of them will
Right.
just go and automatically start changing things. And when you go in and start changing things, you create discords, right? You're going in and basically you reinventing the wheel, and you're upsetting everyone else. They're getting frustrated because they're like, "Look, that's not the problem," or "We tried that and it doesn't work. So let's do this." But you will get that from communicating with them. So I think just making that assumption of that they know the answer without finding exactly what's going on, and also just their approach to things. I think leader is about character, and I think if you don't have character, not just with work, but it's also as a human being, just as a person. I think
Right.
if you lack character and you lack empathy, then it makes it difficult for the employees and for the institution to feel comfortable with you. And a lot of leaders that I come encounter with just throughout my time, were just, "Hey, congratulations, you're now in charge of this," with no guidance, no training, no anything. So I think that's the main problem is them making a decision not knowing everything. And you don't have to know everything, but just try to find out what the problem is before you try to fix it. Because you may spend your time and your efforts fixing something that doesn't need to be fixed or has already been fixed.
No, I agree with that 100%. Plus, you had mentioned something about not only are you potentially wasting time on fixing something that doesn't need fixed, but you talk about upsetting the apple cart and getting to the point where not only are you wasting time on something that doesn't need to be fixed, but more importantly, you're really, really irritating the people that are there.
Yes.
Like you
Yes.
haven't even one, they don't feel listened. They don't feel,
Right.
they're like,
Right.
you don't care about me. You're not
Mhm.
listening to me. You didn't even ask me my thoughts. I've
Right.
been more than happy to tell you. Back to the lean thing about the people closest to the problem know the solution
Right.
best, right?
Right.
And you come in and like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, great, but how's that going to go over for you when, yeah, you might fix fix the perceived problem, but how are you
Right.
people going to be, their attitude towards you afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, like you're putting a band-aid on something and you got folks that have been there 20, 30 years. Like you don't think that they have some type of institutional knowledge or feedback to bring to the table?
Oh, of course they do.
So,
Well, and it's funny because we're doing a workshop the other day with the senior leadership team, and we were
mhm,
talking about the difference between, hey, at what point everything could be improved and fixed, and so I mean, there's value on that, right? There's
right.
always a continuous improvement, but on the other end of it, where are we lacking as far as um, like you said, institutional knowledge and procedures? Because there are some folks I know that you run into them quite often. They're like, we've done X, Y, Z at this place for 37 years, and that's just how it is. Well, why do we do that? Because that's what we do. Well, why do we do that? Because that's what we do. Now, going back and, okay, are the conditions on the ground, going back to what you said, are the conditions on the ground the same now
Right.
as they were when we first started it? If it is, outstanding, great. If it's
Yeah.
not, maybe it's time to look at, well, why are we doing it that way? And the conditions are different. And maybe you could find that 20, 30, 40-year person that says, yeah, when we enacted this, this was the environment, this was the situation. And when they can give you that context, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, that time is gone and it's time now to improve that and move ahead, or nope, that is just as solid now as it was 37 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
So versus you coming in and, like I said, when the conditions on the ground unfortunately are the same,
Mhm.
and you go in looking to upset the policies and change everything around just because, look, it's the feather in my cap.
Right.
I get to come in and do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, not a good. That doesn't age well.
Right. Right. And especially when you have little to no knowledge about, what the actual problem is. So, I think throughout my career, that's been the biggest challenges that I've seen with like a lot of leadership. They basically say, "Hey, I'm in charge, and this is what we're going to do." Instead of finding out, okay, that doesn't work. Like that approach doesn't work. So just humbling himself to find out, more about the employees, more about the team. And I honestly think it's good. This is what I do before I make any decisions, because when you get there, they're going to pile you with all of these problems. No
Oh, yeah.
solutions, just problems. So once you get there, before you actually start making decisions, kind of going through them, walking through them, seeing, okay, what's going on? And instead of making a haste decision without, thought or, the process, find out what's going on, and it may take you longer, right?
Oh,
It
yeah.
may take you
Oh,
longer,
yeah.
but at least you have what you need. Yeah. At least you have what you need.
Well, that's time invested. That's not time wasted.
Correct. 100%.
It's kind of like, just from, from your previous career. Can you imagine somebody, change a command ceremony and, some new, captain comes in or whatever, and not talk to any of their E7s and E8s. Right. I don't talk to any of my senior enlisted, right? I just come in and I'm going to do X, Y, Z because that's what I did in my last command. You're like, yeah, that ain't going to go real well here. Because unfortunately, when you lose the trust of those guys, when everybody looks at the stupid decision, and they're like, okay, I got a new officer, and he says something, and I'm like, no different than when I was in the fire department. You got a new guy who's a lieutenant or a captain or whatever, and he gives a command on the fire scene, and they're looking like, that don't sound right. I can promise you the first thing they do is look over to that 25-year-old salty master firefighter and like, is this for real? Like, yeah. Who's the real leader at that point, right? And you got to, and you end up imparting some of your trust and confidence that the guys have in you. It's like you lend it to that new officer coming in. Same thing. So if you don't have those people when you come in, lending that credibility to you, not just with the rank. Okay, well, you're the chief HR officer, VP of HR, whatever. You coming in, or the new leader, the new department head, whichever. If you don't have those people that have been there for a long time, kind of lend you that little bit of credibility first coming in, beyond the position, beyond the rank. It's a long road to hoe. You got to get those guys on board sooner than later to find out. Yes, I'm going to listen to all the employees, but when you listen to them, you can go to them and say, what's the, like, out of all of this, what's just fussing, griping, and moaning, and what's legit?
Yeah.
And those guys are typically the ones that can give you that bit of insight.
Yeah. And the way like I can't stress enough the importance of the communication. No senior leader wants to hear that their plan is always messed up, that they're not effective, So I think the way you relay it to them, the way you communicate with them, will help them out. And I'm not saying that you have to necessarily sugarcoat it, give it to them straight, but, give them some type of uplift, some type of guidance. Like, look, this may work for this institution or this organization. However, for this culture here, or for these, for our demands, here, this may be a better fit. And leave them with that, let them decide, if they want to go left or right. But instead of saying that it's not going to work, like, your plan's going to fail, because no one wants to hear that. So give them some type of, option and way to, process what you're saying, and let them know that you're helping them.
Well, I love what you mentioned about culture, because when you come from one industry to a different one, there's a lot of things that, no matter your leadership is spot on, your ideas are great, the way you've handled it, you've been very successful, but a lot of times stepping into a new culture, just being honest. I mean, when you go from military, fire, police, whatever, and then you go into some civilian cultures, or just, sometimes, you were dealing with a rough crowd for 20 years, let's just say, It's like, I go work for a construction company. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to work for, an IT firm in Northern Virginia. It's like, man, it's just a little, little different in the culture.
Well, that's why I said that was my personal biggest challenge, going from wearing a uniform, to basically, wearing this, and transitioning. The culture in the Marine Corps is totally different than higher education, totally different. And just having the knowledge to be able to make that transition, and to assume things that I didn't know. So, it took a lot of me meeting a lot of great people, reading a lot, and just finding out more about the institution. And you have to put forth that work, because if you don't do that, if you treat everything as the same as it was, your last job, last,
Yeah.
institution or whatever, it's going to be hard for you to be successful that way, because you're going to be closed minded. You're going to have tunnel vision. And if you got tunnel vision, you're not seeing what's left and right. You're just going straight down the middle. And that straight down the middle could lead you to a road of no return, so.
Exactly. I was shorten your tenure considerably at the new institution. Right. Plus, the nice thing about where you're coming from, I'm pretty confident that you're not the first Marine in history to transition from Marine to full-time Marine to full-time higher ed. So reaching out to those folks that have been doing it for a number of years, and no matter the transit from where to where, but when it's a significantly different culture, you're probably not the first one who's made that adjustment. And reaching out to folks that have, I'm sure was a bit of a godsend and a help when you were making your transition.
Right. And hopefully I'm not the last, right? So yes, absolutely.
Well, people be reaching out to you and like, all right, you're 5 years out from the, making that transition. And like I said, you doing that. It's funny you talk about being the drill instructor and have the hat over the shoulder, but how you would treat somebody, a new person in Paris Island, ain't how you would treat somebody brand new in first day orientation at Shenandoah.
Yeah.
I think it's just a bit different on the tone of voice, and same instruction, different tone and
intent. You may call security on you. May start yelling.
Well, you end up as senior HR, you end up in your own office because you're like, wait a minute, that
ain't right. That ain't right.
You know it's bad when you end up in your own office, right?
Like, we need to talk about this?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you may have some higher ups in your office with you when it comes to that. But exactly. It was just, but culture's completely different. I know a guy who got out of an IT consulting business and went into a different, it was more healthcare related. And like I said, just seemed to be having some struggles with the culture because, like I said, it was just a completely different way of doing things, and that it can be overcome. Absolutely can. It's just recognizing that ahead of time that, okay, this is a little bit different and it's not the way I was used to doing business for X number of years. Just having that humility to realize that sometimes and say, okay, well, let me learn a little bit more about this and kind of acclimate myself to it goes a long way. So last question that we have is, what do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Oh man, that's a great one. I think knowing what their weaknesses are. So know yourself and seek self-improvement. It's one of our principles in the Marine Corps. Knowing yourself and seek self-improvement. So knowing where you are falling short at, knowing areas that you can improve upon and being honest. So before you try to, self-develop or professionally develop or personally develop yourself, you have to find out what's broken. And I think the way you go about that is reading. If you don't read, you can't lead. As General Matter said, like, you have to read. Like, if you're a leader, you have to be a reader. And I'm not talking about reading like romance novels or anything like that. Which
ain't going to help you in this one, is it?
Right. Just anything like we talked about Simon Sinek. Would basically start with why or leaders eat last. Or just any type of books from best practices that'll help you and to get better with yourself. I know for me, what I started doing was listening to a lot of webinars, a lot of podcasts, and a lot of seminars to just help make that transition for me. Because, like you said, Paris Island is totally different than higher education. But even though it's different, even though it's different, you can still take a lot from what you've done to apply here.
100%. Yes.
Like you said, that one, use the example of the one gentleman that was a construction worker and how they wind up, going into the IT field or whatever. Just the work ethic alone will help you. So, I said it to say that you have to want to change. You have to want to change. You have to want to be better. And not changing to where it's compromising, your values or your ethics, but changing for the better. Knowing, realizing the situation and being able to adapt to it. Realizing that, okay, this type of personality, this type of work ethic may have worked on this playing ground, or may have worked in this environment. However, moving into this one, this is what I need to do. And knowing that, knowing that and going about that. So really it have to be inside you. You have to want to do it, because no matter how many seminars you go to, how many webinars you go to, if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe that you can do it, and you don't make the sacrifices to do it, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah, 100%. You might as well just go back home and stream Netflix.
Correct.
You're accomplishing about the same, aren't you?
Right.
Chance to eat popcorn doing it that way.
Right.
You're right. If you, and that's it, just like I said, not change in a bad way, but just growth, professional development,
Right.
wanting to improve, wanting to actually do a good job. And I think a lot of that, you mentioned self-awareness. And so that is a huge one for people. And a couple of things, I'm just a huge fan of data. And I want to, and this one thing I think will double back on a couple of them. One, self-reflection is a big one, but a lot of times it's hard to pick up everything. So I'm a huge fan of assessment tools. And so how do I communicate? How do I process information? What are things that motivate and drive me? What am I good at? How my systems, judgment kind of thing. And even as a leader, doing the 360 end of it, like, what is the, I'm not like when you talk about going in and you speaking with the leader, well, I might tell you X, Y, and Z, but instead of, you could break the news, well, I'm not telling you, you're doing a crappy job. The data says it could be a little bit better, right? And so a lot of times just being able to break brand news based on objective data is a lot of but people being able to actually do that, and hopefully, knock on wood, be able to do that with a team to really get a people they work with all the time. That self-reflection, that self-assessment is huge, because once you realize, oh, this is kind of how I am, this is how people can maybe perceive me, how I might come across to others, and I don't even realize it when I'm stressed. Just little things like that to, build empathy and build understanding, and realize, hey, not everybody's wired the same as we are, right? And so just because, I'm the 3 bullet point kind of guy, I probably shouldn't be the one going around vomiting 3 bullet points on everybody, because that's just not how everybody functions.
Right. And, as a leader, I think you have to be versatile with your approach, and it's, and a lot of that comes through experience. It comes through work. And sometimes you have to really humble yourself, like you have to know that you don't know all the answers, and that you could always find a way to seek more improvement. And I think if you, if you have that approach and continue to be a lifelong learner, it'll force you to want to grow, to want to be better, to want to develop yourself. And that growth and that development, it'll help you with dealing with people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, and communicating with them. And I think if you, the sooner you realize that, and the sooner you adopt that, the more successful you'll become.
2 things I got out of it were 3: self-awareness, leaders are readers, and you got to generally care about others.
Right. 100%.
It's growth and development. No, that's awesome. So tell our listeners how they can connect with you, how they can connect with the university, basically, connect with you on LinkedIn, have all the Dr. Lee goodness, right? If they want to soak it up, right? How do they plug into all that?
Yeah. I don't have a website yet, but I'm on LinkedIn. So if you type in my name, I'll pop up and they can send me a friend request. I'm thinking of doing a book at some time the next year or so. And I want to talk about, I definitely want to talk about the transition piece for a lot of service members. And well, not just for service members, but for anyone who is making a big leap, and they probably have self-doubt, or anyone that's seeking to go back to school, because they want to talk about like anomalies. That's me. I barely graduated high school. I joined the Marine Corps to go to serve the country because I didn't want to go to school. And I wound up getting a doctorate degree. So how does that happen? Right. So, I just want to let them know that basically that they believe and they have the passion and desire to do it, that they can do it. No excuses. You can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I tell you, man, it's there's a lot of folks, it's particularly the military. That's the biggest hang up, is like the transition piece, and any way that they can kind of connect and kind of relate. Oh, okay, that's how this person did it. And okay, I see the struggles that will be coming, 6 months before I get out, a year before I get out. I can already prepare for it. And you're right, it's not just the military. I was folks that are lifelong police officers, lifelong fire department, lifelong, all kinds of different, that type of industry where they're used to this. Like I said, especially when they have to wear a uniform and it's a little bit more disciplined and structured than other places. And then to get out and realize, wait a minute, that framework that had, I could rely on that framework. And now that framework is gone. No different than going from my coursework and your doctorate degree to now all of a sudden, hey, go forth and write a dissertation. All of a sudden, the framework and the structure is gone. You're like, it's almost as much of a transition. I'm not saying it's apples for apples, but it's similar. That the framework, the scaffolding gets pulled out from underneath you, and you got to figure it out on your own. So that would be a good way to put in that book. So no, I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that offline. That's fantastic. Absolutely. So with that, like I said, best endeavors on the book. And like I said, I encourage everybody to connect with Dr. Lee on LinkedIn. Thank you again for being on the podcast. And
my pleasure.
And that'll be it for this episode of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. So we will see you all next time.